maybe Bitcoin price just goes up because people like speculating, and it doesn't matter if it's IOU Bitcoin or it's real Bitcoin. Of course, it matters to people like us who take self-custody. It's a great opportunity, in fact. I'm confident enough in Bitcoin that I don't need to talk about it. People are overestimating the short-term power of what Bitcoin can do and underestimating the long-term power of what it can do. I think what you should be saying is, are you free? Is your salary buying the same as it used to, more or less? These are the questions that make people think. People are great at picking up when somebody is doing better than you. Talk about these topics that inevitably lead to Bitcoin as the solution, instead of offering the solution right away to a problem that people don't realize they have.
I think last time we talked also on the concept of Bitcoin borrowing, but also how to be as free as possible. That's why I remembered also where you live, because I think we also talked about how to position yourself in this world and where to live. And you're now, interestingly enough, writing something that you just sent me before, and it was interesting, prepare, survive, and thrive in Bitcoin, somewhere along those lines. What are you doing there? Is that a book that you're kind of writing on, or just an article, or just some thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of all of those things. It started, maybe a little bit of background to your viewers and listeners. Maybe some people know I've been publishing and translating Bitcoin books for the past 6 years, mostly other people's work. And I do write on occasion myself when I have the time. And I wrote this article for Citadel 21, which is the magazine or zine published by Hodlnaut. I wrote this article called Wielding Bitcoin, Prepare. It didn't have the subtitle then, but now I'm writing it into a book with the subtitle of Prepare, Survive, and Thrive. It's a project that I started after that article, maybe 3 years ago, maybe more. It's something that I'm sort of writing, like you put it. I'm sort of writing it on the side. Not really. I'm just putting a lot of thoughts on a piece of paper, a digital paper, and then I hope that it's going to turn into a book that I can publish. That is mine. That is not somebody else's book. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Would that be your first book, or did you write books before?
It will be my first published book, at least. I've written tons of things for myself, just to, as a process of, as a thinker, it helps me to organize my thoughts to write things. But I have never published, apart from one short story in 21 Futures, Tales from the Time Chain. That's the only one, a piece that made it into print from me.
Interesting. And I want to talk about that, but maybe before, because there has been a lot happening since the last episode. What are kind of your highlights in the last year, and how did you see that all coming to 1 year ago? I think the most exciting thing was the ETF and the launch there, and now we have a strategic Bitcoin reserve and the whole development there. It's kind of crazy how far we've gotten in that 1 year.
Yeah, that's interesting that you should ask that and put it that way. Last time we spoke, I believe the topic was Bitcoin is boring, right? I started making these quite controversial tweets and publishing my opinions about Bitcoin, how it is boring and how we're sort of facing this mundanification and normification of Bitcoin, which I find extremely bullish for Bitcoin, of course, because this is how all technological innovations make their way into the wider market. After resistance, it becomes kind of commonplace, boring even, and people just start using it. And I think this is sort of what's happening. And the whole, nation state adoption or companies starting to use Bitcoin, wider adoption. I live in Madeira, where now over 100 places accept Bitcoin as a payment method. That was not nearly as much a year ago, let alone 2 years ago. So a lot of things for sure have happened in a short period of time. Personally, I've focused on building and working on other projects that generate cash flow and generate contacts. This is something that I'm talking in the book. This is the preparation part, which will then allow you to survive. I guess it's not a controversial opinion to say that we're sort of looking at some kind of a financial fallout, some kind of a crash in a global scale. So surviving that, and then what comes after, it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, there's always empires rise and fall, and this time will be no different. We will raise up again, just like Bitcoin. It crashes and then it rises up again from a higher level and goes even higher. So this is a inbuilt property in human action, in my opinion. So I think a lot about time preference now. That it's a very popular thing to say, like, have a low time preference and, don't be in a hurry. People sort of say this, but I don't see a lot of action backing it, which is exactly why I'm writing this book. It's going to be more like a grounded, unpopular opinion about Bitcoin. It's a very bullish take, in my opinion, but it's a much more grounded take than a lot of so-called influencers or people who would like to ride the wave of Bitcoin NGU technology kind of stuff. I'm not really into that anymore. Like I focus on more fundamental stuff. Like for me, Bitcoin has already become boring. So it is safe for me to step away from it and stop my evangelism in a way, which is something that I've been doing for years, almost a decade. And I think it's time. Bitcoin has reached a point of, some people talk about escape velocity. I think we're very close to that. Like you cannot undo what Bitcoin has done. So now it's more about how can you improve yourself, your surroundings, and find a way to survive possible calamities, financial calamities, and then thrive and build back better.
Interesting. What does I think escape velocity is something that gets, as you said, like thrown around a lot. What does that mean for you? Like once you reach that?
Well, what it means to me is that I'm confident enough in Bitcoin that I don't need to talk about it. In fact, I prefer not to talk about it. At least when I'm with the so-called normies, I used to bring it up in every single conversation, to the point of annoyance. I'm sure many can relate. I was that guy. I'm not that guy anymore, and I don't want to. I think I did my part, and I'm doing my part in building a Bitcoin library. So when people are ready to take that step and learn about this technology, and some people will never be, and I fully accept that, that information is now readily available. So that's part of sort of the escape velocity. Like it's there, the seed is planted, and now it's up to humans to take action. And usually humans always are seeking profit one way or another. And Bitcoin has a funny way of tweaking those actions through perceived value add on that action. So it changes the equation slightly. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Bitcoin fixes the world or Bitcoin fixes everything. It just simply provides a better, more justified monetary framework for exchanging value between individuals. So this should definitely help, at least in my opinion, to bring about a more sustainable world where human action is not skewed by so-called fiat incentives, but rather those kind of things. Like there will still be people who will cheat and lie and hurt other people, but it will become more difficult and more expensive. And I think that's the best that we can ever hope. So I don't have this rosy view of a utopian world. It will be not that different than what we've already seen in history, but it will, like I said, empires rise and fall, and then we start up again, and then we raise up higher. So this will continue to be a trend.
Yeah, this incentive is a big thing, I feel like, and that's what a lot of people think, like, oh, like Bitcoin fixes the health system, Bitcoin fixes that. Like, yes and no. Like it just gives the right incentives. People will still be, like, humans will still be humans, and humans have errors even in a sound money systems, but at least we have the right incentive framework, and incentives is everything in life.
Yes, exactly. Like a good example would be like regulation in food industry. Let's say that there's a worry that if we don't interfere at a government level to the restaurant operation, the restaurant owner will use poor quality ingredients and poison their customers, which is a ridiculous claim because then they won't have customers. So unless they are, of course, getting subsidized by the government or some other body to give this poison to people and getting paid that way. And this is where the skewed fiat incentives come from. But like you said, it's human action in the end that dictates the outcomes. And it just becomes, I guess, more expensive to be an asshole.
Love that. It's like also interesting of like how much the state should interfere in free markets, and I'm very much of the belief that as long as there's no monopolies, like what is the role in there? Now we have so much interference, and not even capital itself, not even money itself is free. And then they have in Austria, our new government is now implementing a rent stop, no more rent increases. I think only like 1% this year and like 2% next year you can increase it, something like that, which is obviously it's not curing the cause of increased rent, it's just curing the symptom or like the consequence of it, which is really weird that people think that actually helps. But I don't know where I wanted to go with that, but it's really interesting to think about a Bitcoin world where all of a sudden you don't have a centralized government. Do you think we get there? The world where there's no central printer?
I don't think so. I mean, let's first think about what you mean by we. Like, I don't think there is a we in humankind. There is you and me, and then there's, friendship. I guess it's best defined by people who have aligned incentives and work together to reach a common goal. So I think that since the dawn of man has been the driving force, Nash equilibrium, people for themselves working together because that way they can attain, more things for themselves. So it's purely selfish act all through and through. So I think, to answer your question, I don't think humanity as a collective. In fact, I think there might be something of a first hard fork of humanity because of technology, not only Bitcoin, but internet, Nostr, all these technologies, encryption, that allow sort of like I guess now we would call it a shadow society. But it depends on your perspective, right? If you live in the shadow society, then you might call the other society a clown world or whatever you choose to call it. So I think this will happen, and it's already happening. Like, people are already regulatory shopping through multiple passports, having a company in one country, living in another, and then having a third one. It has become very easy to avoid violence, and this is something that Sovereign Individual makes an absolutely great case. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Written in '97. Beautiful book, one of my favorites. And it makes the case how the nation state will no longer be needed. Like, the reason for nation state has been throughout history to provide mostly security services for the clients, which are citizens. And now the clients are no longer treated as clients. They're treated like cattle, or, something to pump value out from. Something that has no rights but has a lot of obligations. So the government should not dictate, like they cannot give you anything. They take away, they limit your freedoms. Like, you are born free and then they start limiting you. So this is something that is rather new. Also a byproduct of information age, because now it is possible to influence large groups of humans all at once. And this is also, to go back to your original question, why I think that fiat is not going to go in that sense away, because there's always these tools and there's always these customers who are willing to buy whatever these, snakes, oil peddlers are selling, as long as the story is good, right? As long as the customers think that they are getting what they want. And now the customers are thinking like taxes are the price that you pay for living in a civilized society. Well, this has been in the recent past maybe crumbling a little bit, and I think people are starting to realize that maybe it's not fully true, maybe it's not true at all, maybe it's the opposite. And at the same time, technology allows individuals to defend themselves better. And this is something from Sovereign Individual as well. They predicted, internet, they predicted Bitcoin, 3D printers, essentially. So it becomes much more difficult to attack the individual. And this is why the security services that nation states used to provide are no longer needed by a subset of humankind. So this is what I mean by the hard fork of humanity. I think the majority, most of the humans will still prefer to outsource the responsibility. And then there's people like us maybe who prefer to embrace personal responsibility and use those tools to attain maximum freedom and protect it at all costs, while the other party engages in, followership. It's a very old thing, like Plato already had this cave allegory, where there's these ruling classes that dictate what the bottom class will see. And the bottom class, like, you have to work really hard and you have to want to peer out of the cave. But I suspect that most people will prefer to stay in the cave, if you know what I mean.
Yes, and it's something that actually came up right in the previous episode that I recorded, where we discussed how people are not. Sometimes people don't want freedom. They right. prefer to have something above them. They prefer for them to have something above them, but they also want to, they put that also onto all the other ones, because they are scared if someone is free and living a good life, because it's their own insecurity. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole of are people ready to take their own freedom in their hand in terms of like getting into Bitcoin self-custody and running their own nodes and stuff like that. I personally think not. I think most people are cozy, and most people will use even if they use Bitcoin, they probably won't even notice that Bitcoin is on the back end of it. We can see a little bit already on Nostra. There are people on Nostra that are not familiar with Bitcoin. It's a small group, but they are there. It will probably happen at the same way as people are not familiar with TCP/IP and they still use Facebook and WhatsApp and YouTube. And they will continue to, but they don't need to know how to set up their own email servers or something like that. They just use Gmail. And maybe the same thing happens to Bitcoin, where the majority uses custodians and only a small group that takes their freedom and sovereignty really serious. They are the ones actually caring about, where did this Bitcoin come from? Do they know who I am? Like basically the KYC argument, is that my control, or is the control of the keys somewhere else? I don't know, like how much, sometimes I feel like there's a big revolution going on of empowering individuals, but at the same time, it's like, people want to stay cozy. Do you think that there could be a big revolution going on where a lot of people wake up and get to that freedom? Or is it just because I am in a bubble and most of my friends get towards more of a freedom and sovereignty mindset?
I think a little bit both. I think you're right on the money when you say that people don't want self-custody. They want better custodians. And I think this is what they're going to get as well. Because people who do care about doing things so-called right, in our opinion at least, they do build those businesses. They do build those services that they want to use and they think are proper. And the only thing they have to do is provide a better service to the normal people, the normal consumer, so they will switch to that service. That as simple as that. Like you said, they won't know what's running underneath. They won't care if it's Bitcoin or diamond points or whatever, as long as they get what they want. And I think the same goes with states. I think the states are going to be decreased because there's no longer, nobody can afford to compete with high overheads as a country, right? So it must at least decrease the size of different governments. So sort of a global balkanization, what happened in, once the Soviet Union started, breaking into pieces. I think in global scale, this will happen. And what we will see is some sort of city-state. Like, this is an old idea as well that has been working when there were less humans. And now, because of information age and technology and, steel and gasoline, we've been able to create much bigger empires that work on fiat money, which, if that's going to go away, or it's not going to go all the way out, but there will be options. And this is the crucial difference for anything that everything else is the same. But now we have the option to create something better, to really compete with the old nation state. But it used to be the certainty, death and taxes, right? And that is no longer the certainty. We have the original alternative, which is free market collaboration between free people. So we go back to private contracts instead of laws. You break the contract, you're out of the city. As simple as that. Instead of being born and sort of underwriting this invisible contract that you are now property of the state and you get a slave number, and then somehow they have to get you into debt to be able to pay their own bills and expand further. Instead of that, you actually go to a city. You choose from the variety of different places that you might want to live in that provide you the services, and then you pay for the service. So it's just like a service contract or a subscription. That is a very popular thing nowadays. I think that's going to be a very attractive model to many people, especially people like us who know what we want, and we don't want to pay some kind of like weird, alimony for the other people to use the money that we have no control over. We want to have control over what we actually pay and what we get. And I think this is the option that is going to be a game changer. But we are quite far off from that, in my opinion. Like, I think people are overestimating the short-term power of what Bitcoin can do, and maybe underestimating the long-term power of what it can do. Like, it might be a couple more generations, as it usually is, before something truly breaks through. And then, of course, even after Bitcoin has become commonplace, we'll still have this, hundreds of years of baggage from the previous empire that sort of has to disintegrate to some degree and change into something better. But I do think, like, I feel very optimistic about the future. It sometimes doesn't sound like that, maybe. It's just that maybe my time preference is lowering even more than it used to be. I'm not concerned about the Bitcoin price at all. I'm more concerned about creating infrastructure contraptions that make staying free and protecting freedom easy. Because easy, convenience, these are the things that most people are looking for. And once we have that and we present that option, I do believe that people are going to choose that option.
And it's very right what you say with governments decreasing, and we can literally see that right now. With example in America with Doge, we can see that even in Austria, the current government is decreasing spending and cutting spending a lot, and they're even having someone in place that looks now at where are over regulations and where are things we can cut back. There's our own state secretary for that now. And Germany, also the newly elected guy said that we have to cut down on spending. We're spending way too much as a government. So I feel like, and this was not popular like just a few years ago. When you hear it in politics just a few years ago, there was not that popular saying of like we have to cut spending of government, at least what I saw. And now it's getting to be like, oh yeah, like everyone knows we have to cut spending because we cannot keep expanding our debt on a government level, because that brings out like other problems with inflation, and then the currency system breaks down. So it feels like governments, and those are slowly, and we are probably overestimating the speed of it, but slowly beginning to understand what they have to do, and we are entering that new area of less institutions and more individuals, if you will. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, well, at least the ones that want to remain in competition, like US has been leading the global competition for quite a while. And I think they're probably a little bit intimidated by the developments in the East, mainly China. So those are like two superpowers now in competition of global dominance in a way. And funnily enough, the key to winning that competition is decreasing in government size, right? And propping up the sovereign individual and their opportunities. That's the American dream, right? Everybody can make their own fate and their own money and their own freedom. So, yeah, counterintuitively, you will win this race as a nation state by decreasing your overhead, decreasing the size of your government, giving more freedom to the people, rather, releasing the restraints. Like I said before, you can't really give freedom. You're already free, and then you get, your freedom gets decreased. So lifting those limitations from individuals, I think that is a revelation that a lot of country formers are going to have very soon, and those who don't are going to simply be left out of the competition.
I love that framing of like, we are free as humans, and then the restrictions are coming onto us. So like the actual human beings, like we are actually free all the time, but the limitations are kind of set in front of us. So it's not getting us more freedom. It's just like removing the limitations
Yes.
from us. I like that, but not as we said, like not everyone is ready for that. And I think that's why also, as you said in the beginning, you don't actively bring up Bitcoin in conversations. And I very much also do exactly that. I mean, for me, it's like everyone knows I'm the Bitcoin guy. So Bitcoin comes in conversations just because I'm on the table usually. So I don't have to do it now. But I saw that those who are ready for Bitcoin and those are actually interested, just come to me privately or DM me or like call me and like, hey, like, can you explain this Bitcoin thing for me? And those are ready and like they're actually going deeper. And the other ones are not interested in. And so it actually does not work to orange pill people actively in that regard. They have to be also open and willing to learn. Otherwise it's just a wasted time. And maybe you even push them further away from Bitcoin if you try to orange pill them too hard, because then they're like, why does he want so badly that I'm in Bitcoin? It's like, you want to push me in? No, like they should get pulled in and not
Exactly.
pushing them in.
Like in a way, it's kind of irresponsible to lightly orange pill somebody, because let's say that you orange pill somebody at 20K in 2017 when it hit the top, right? And they buy, and then it goes to 3K and they sell, and you're the dick, obviously, because you got them in, and then it goes to 100K, and they're never going to be able to recover from that, right? Because in the end, you were right. And, their time horizon was too short. They are the ones that fucked it up. And it takes a different kind of a human than most people are, I think, to be able to look into the mirror and admit that you've been wrong. And the older you are, the more invested you are in the lies that you lived and the belief that you held. It is very, very difficult to break those chains and shatter those chains and say that, hey, I done goofed. I need to learn more about this. I need a fresh start. But a lot of people focus on the price. And this is also why I don't like NGU anymore. Like, it's obvious that if a absolutely finite asset has any use, as time approaches infinity, so does the valuation of that asset. That much is obvious. It's a mathematical truth. So NGU does go up. But I would like not to focus on the price at all. Like, you should be focusing on how you can build something lasting, how you can build something that generates usefulness to people. How can you be useful to people? Stacking sats and staying humble, that's not going to solve anything unless you're actively solving problems for other human beings. That's how you never go hungry. And then, yeah, of course, you want to earn Bitcoin directly, or you want to convert your earnings into Bitcoin, the hard asset, and hold on to that. Sure, that is saving. That's just, prudent human action. But I think a lot of people, myself included, when we orange pill people, we focus too much on the factor that, hey, you buy now and you hold 5 years, and then you make this much gains. I think that can be very damaging, because that is gambling, that is trading, and this is, sure, if that's your profession, I have nothing against that, but most people are not apt for that kind of thing. Sort of like playing poker. You can do it for fun, but I wouldn't lead with that. I think something that resonates much more with people that I start to see, even in normie conversation, is like, what is inflation? Why do the prices keep going up? These are much more powerful ideas, and you don't even have to mention Bitcoin at all. How I got into these ideas was, I watched a movie called Zeitgeist. I don't know if you know that, from 2009, I believe, that laid the case for, the modern money mechanics and inflation quite well. So I understood the problem. I just didn't understand that there was a solution for it. So I think a lot of people will understand this problem because they see it every day in their life. But if you are offering them sort of a solution to a problem that they maybe don't have, like, yeah, everybody kind of wants to be rich, sure. But usually when you say that you buy this and then later you're rich, that kind of comes off wrong, right? I mean, that people should be suspicious of that. And then you can't guarantee that either, because the incentives to acquire that finite asset are immense, global incentives for that. So there's a lot of powerful parties that will not have in their best interest for the price to climb too high. And then there's the convenience part. People love convenience, so they don't mind buying IOU Bitcoins. Like, I bet a lot of the market currently is just Excel sheet, basically keeping track of people's balances and doing fractional reserve, because nobody cares to verify if they actually have that money or not. And I think this is going to be an increasing problem. Well, problem in the sense that if you think the NGU way, and if you think in the terms of like, oh, supply shock is coming and it's going to rocket Bitcoin to the moon, and maybe it's not. Maybe Bitcoin price just goes up because people like speculating. And it doesn't matter if it's IOU Bitcoin or it's real Bitcoin. Of course, it matters to people like us who take self-custody. It's a great opportunity, in fact. When Bitcoin goes down, you can stack more and you can put it in the cold and it will be good for you. But I think this kind of like Omega candle, this kind of talk about Bitcoin going up really fast, really quickly during our lifetimes, it's maybe not what you should be saying. I think what you should be saying is, are you free? Is your salary buying the same as it used to, more or less? These are the questions that make people think without pushing kind of like your agenda. And people are great at picking up when somebody is doing better than you, right? They inherently understand that, okay, and this is probably something from the DNA, like the competition, that somebody's better off, somebody's more free, and you can't figure out how. So that kind of creates dissonance in yourself and unrest. And usually you lash out to those people because, you get jealous, and it's not very productive to do that. Like, jealousy can be productive if you think that, oh, I want that as well. And then you go to talk to that guy, like you said, some people, they do approach you and they want to know, like, what are you doing? Like, how did you reach that position in life? And then you can tell them, you can clue them in, because now they have the spark. But I think that needs to come from the people themselves. So yeah, I think I've been taking the direction lately to talk about these topics that inevitably lead to Bitcoin as the solution, instead of offering the solution right away to a problem that people don't realize they have.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. That's a great point. And I like the orange building as a role model system because people come to you. And I think that's the best thing Bitcoiners can do. Live the best life you can possibly live and make them aware that some of that came because of Bitcoin. And people naturally will connect those two things. I mean, maybe you don't even have to tell them about Bitcoin because maybe they will just ask you, like, where do you save your money? And they don't even know that you're a Bitcoiner. And then all of a sudden you're like, I put it in Bitcoin. And just like, so like being a role model and living a great life is probably the most effective orange pilling strategy for you, and because people are naturally going towards that. And I want to get into a little bit. I wanted to get way earlier in that, but I think it's really interesting of like how we can prepare for those things, because you're writing down that and you already dropped some things here and there. But I think it's really important that we understand hodling might not be enough. What else can we do, and how can we prepare for something that might happen down the road in the fiat system?
Yeah, I think one of the most important thing in prepping, so-called, is managing your expectations. Like, what do you expect that is going to happen? If you have low expectations, there's a high probability that you won't be disappointed in life. So that's number one thing. Don't disappoint yourself by having higher expectations than you should, maybe. Also, you don't need to be overly pessimistic and negative. That's not my point. It's just manage your expectations. Maybe, nation state adoption is not all good because Bitcoin can be used for surveillance and stuff. Maybe you should not be cheering for nation states adopting Bitcoin at this point. Maybe it's is not great. Maybe you should instead focus on how you can make yourself and your family more free and safe. And another thing is, stacking sats and staying humble, which is something I said earlier. This is a poorly thought out meme in my opinion. And also it can be kind of damaging, because it's kind of leads to this slave mentality in a way. A lot of people that I know are still stuck in their fiat. A lot of them quit actually recently, but a lot of people are stuck in their dead-end fiat jobs just to stack sats and to so-called stay humble, and then sort of waiting for this magical moon to appear as if out of nowhere. So what I like to say is quit your job and get to work. What I mean is a job is something that you go into and exchange your time, your free time, for money, which is fine, especially when you're young and you don't have experience. But work is something that you do just for the work, just to be useful, just to find fulfillment. So if you can do that and get paid in Bitcoin, like that's the dream, right? So I would just encourage people to start thinking in those terms, because there are ways that you can, especially with the information age tools. I'm quite confident that everybody has this specific skill set that they can monetize, and then find ways to convert that income, those cash flows, into Bitcoin. And I think this is something that, Stack Sats and Stay Humble misses by a bit. And I've seen it many times when these people, and myself included, when we quit the fiat habit, when we quit the fiat job, the 9 to 5. I mean, you can still work 9 to 5 if you want, but you know what I mean. Like once you get out of that hamster's wheel, you start to feel way better and you start to feel more productive. You can get more new ideas. You are free to do every morning when you wake up, you decide what are you going to be working on that day, all day, and being useful to people and getting paid in sats. Like that's, I want to encourage people to explore their personal specific skill set. Maybe you studied for it, maybe you didn't. Maybe it's something that has been your hobby all your life and you just never realized that it can be a profession as well. Profession does not come from institutionalized education necessarily. In fact, I would argue that most of the time it doesn't. I have formal education as well, but that's not really necessarily what I want to do. It is something that I can do and something that I do on occasion, but is it something that I would choose to do if I didn't have to? Probably not. And this is something that goes with the preparation, and this will help you in the next step, which will be the survival, because maybe you will be out of job. You will most likely be out of job if you're in some, especially if you're working for government, right? A lot of people are still working on government for government and stacking sats on the side. So it also goes to the managing the expectations. Like you can't expect that to continue. So what then? What is your contingency plan? How are you going to leverage your personal specific skill set to stay ahead? Well, first of all, to stay alive and support your family, but also to stay ahead, like coming up with those new ways of monetizing your human action, your personal action. What are the steps that you're taking now? So I encourage everybody to ask themselves that question.
It's a super interesting one, and there are two things. First thing, I'm really interested in it. How do you think in general, because there's a trend towards freelancing, smaller entrepreneurs of like 2, 3, 5 people companies, even like maybe like under 20 people companies, like they get more and more popular. You see those trends all over the world, and also like even remote work and freelancing. How do you think Bitcoin and the information age in general will impact that? Is it like smaller and smaller companies, the same as governments decrease, the company sizes decrease also, and in more smaller compartments that have just working closely together?
I think so. And I think this is something that we are seeing right now. Smaller freelancer collectives or whatever you want to call them, small groups of people working on a very specific problem, whether it be development or publishing. Like my company, Consensus Network, is what I call the starfish organization. So it's like a very, very distributed. The people who are working on our projects live all around the world, and I don't know what most of the time is happening even, or what projects are we, so-called we, working. It doesn't really matter because everybody is kind of working for themselves, and they are creating these little units with people who can help them do and reach the goal. For example, getting a book in a certain language takes a team, right? Usually it's not a one person job. So then you find that person to do it with you. And then you find the framework that we created, for example, for that. And they can use it, and it sort of becomes its own thing and starts to live on its own. And this is a much more resilient and anti-fragile way, just like Bitcoin. We have these nodes and groups of nodes, and we have mining pools. It's the same principle. And I think the same thing is going to happen, what we talked before, like with city-states, government level action. Instead of having these massive governments with huge overheads, same goes for the companies. Let's say, companies like Amazon, are they too big to fail? I think they are too big to succeed in the future world, right? Because they won't be able to compete much longer with that kind of overhead. And if you try to centralize a huge operation like that, you are bound to run into inefficiencies. And this is why communism doesn't work either. So I think the freedom movement is on the rise. It is a trend, definitely, that I see. Freelancing. I'm never going to have an employee again in any of my companies, because there's no need for that. It's much more clean to have solo entrepreneurs or small companies that work together. And I think the same will be true for city-states, just small places of like-minded people that want to live a certain lifestyle with certain level of service, getting together because makes a lot of sense for them, not because they were born in a certain area and they have to. This used to be the case most of humanity. You were born in somewhere, you hang out with the same people all your life, you go to the same school, you work there, and you die there. This has not been true for the past couple decades at least. But it takes time.
Very interesting. My also I say employee, but I have just two people that are solo entrepreneurs that working with me on project, but they both also work on other things, and so I think that's a really great and efficient way to work together, because they are specialized in that thing, and they bring a lot of experience even from other projects into my project, because they also work on other things, but in the same discipline. So it's a really great thing of connecting in a decentralized way, and then you just have to once set up a process of how you work together, and they are both far away from me. They are both not in Austria, not even in Europe. And it's so easy. And we don't have to have a daily stand-up meeting because we know what we do. We set up a process and it works magically, and it's really cool. And so it's almost no overhead. It's just you just place the right things. How are the things called? I only know the English word, the German word for it. But you just place the right puzzle pieces together, and they're working on its own, and it totally makes sense if you look at it, because there's a product, a podcast coming out in the end of it, but the puzzle pieces to that, they're coming together on its own, and there's no need to build a headquarter in Austria with 50 employees, and that. I think it's an old system.
Yeah, it's the original. It emerges from nothing. Anarchy, basically. Anarchy does not equal chaos. It just means that you don't have centralized leadership. One of my favorite examples is the Amazon Indians that have leadership as these chiefs, Nantans they were called. So what happens is that one of these chiefs is a very good hunter, and it makes sense for these other tribes members to follow him because he's so good. So we were talking about leadership by example and being a role model. This is the original way to learn and collaborate and find leadership. And the crucial difference is that the leader does not choose you, you choose the leader, right? You choose whose example and whose way are you going to follow. And if it's not going to be you, it's going to be someone else. And you can choose to follow whoever you want as long as you want. And if you decide that this role model is no longer working for what you want, or your goals change, so you can change leadership, which is not true currently in big companies, or can be very difficult to change leaders or leave that position, and even more so in nation state in the concept of nation state, it's even more difficult because you're even more invested in being a subject of someone rather than choosing who you want to follow. Even though you always had that option, it's just become infinitely more easy with information age tools to do that.
Absolutely. And you talk about those 3 stages of like prepare, survive, and thrive. Before we can survive, there has to be some sort of crash or some sort of event. How do you look at, like, how will that look like? Obviously, it's impossible to know exactly, but what are you imagining there?
Well, we have some, historical examples. Like, for example, in Argentina, 2001, there's a book written about that. It's called How to Survive Economic Collapse. I kind of recommend that book, but it's not a happy read. It will show you firsthand what happens when the so-called illusionary safety nets fall apart. Because like we talked before, the original reason why nation states exist is to provide security in exchange for taxes. And, it works until it doesn't. And once it stops working, this is what's going to happen. There's going to be riots. There's going to be looting. There's going to be people, killing each other for a piece of bread. Once their money is no longer good to feed their family, people become what people are, animals. And there won't be laws. The police will not be there to help you. Another example from the 90s would be the rooftop Koreans. I don't know if you know about that in Los Angeles, where these riots broke up, and the shop owners, the Koreans, had to defend their shops from the rooftops with guns and build up their own defenses. So that was going back to the basics. So we are living in an illusion, in a sky castle that is very penetrable. It gives you the false sense of security, which is much more dangerous than actual freedom. People are much more afraid of actual freedom. But if you compare a lion in a cage in a zoo to a lion in the wild that has no guarantees if it's going to be killed the next day or if it's going to find a meal or a mate, these are all sort of guaranteed when you're a captive. But which one is thriving? Which one do you want to be?
And I think it's great because I can really personally relate, because I was literally exactly 1 year ago on like 1st of March was the 28th of February last year was literally my last day at work. And since then I completely left that behind. And since that, yes, I now make more money than I did before, and I have more freedom and all those good things. But there's also a price, like you have to care for your money more. Like my money thinking really changed in 1 year, because all of a sudden it's not a guarantee that the next month, like the salary is coming. You really get used to like, the salary is coming. Like you spend differently if you have to earn every euro yourself, and you have to argue and negotiate and all those things. But the biggest thing actually that came from that for me was the creativity of having the freedom. I needed a solid 3 to 4 months to get used to it, like 3 to 4 months to get used to there's nobody above me. There's no guardrails. But once you find yourself working in that environment, and you have a switch, and all of a sudden, everything there's so much creativity and so much ideas coming that I have days where I stand up at 3. I usually go at bed like at 10 p.m. and stand up at like 6 a.m. But there are days where I stand up at 3 a.m. because I can't sleep, because I've had an idea that I want to discover now. I never had that in my Fiat job where I stood up at 3 a.m. like, oh, I have to do that work now because I really want to. Yeah. In the Fiat job, it's more like I have to stand up till 3 a.m. because I have to finish a project. That might be the case. Now it's like I stand up in the middle of the night. I'm like, oh, like that's a crazy good idea. I have to pursue that. Usually it's not that great, but like at 3 a.m. it sounds really great. It's just that creativity that comes up, and all of a sudden you can be in the creating sphere and in the idea sphere, in the collaboration sphere, and not in the, oh yeah, today is Tuesday and those are my 5 tasks. I will do my 5 tasks, and okay, I put a check mark, and yeah, my boss is happy. I'm now going back and eating. It's a whole different thing. And I mean, I kind of work in a similar style. I work out in the morning, I work during the day, and in the evening I take off. And like the working hours did not change. I still work like from like 8, 7, like I work actually more than I did before. But the thing that really changes the creativity, the thriving, and just after a year, I can really see a difference there. And there are probably like 50 other small examples that I can bring, but that really gives a person the freedom of doing it. I just don't know if everyone is ready for that. I don't know, like as we said before, a lot of people prefer working in a clear structure and doing that, and they would be scared, or they wouldn't. I don't know, like they might be not able to even do that from their own personal things. I have a lot of doubts about about how we get there and how many people will adopt that freedom.
Yeah, I mean, you would still have that option. I mean, you should be aware that there's another option. Like you said, I've been working much more since I quit my job. I will never have a job, but I'm always working. And an interesting anecdote might be that humans are the only animals that engage in, artificial cutting of sleep, which is putting on the alarm to get to work. And no other animal does this, right? Why is that?
Interesting. You wake up every day without alarm?
Yeah, most of the time, unless I have a meeting or something that I really need to get into, or I had a long night and for some reason I need to get up. There's uses for that, but I don't have like a 9-to-5 schedule anymore.
Yeah, I do have my girlfriend next to me, but other than that, maybe I would also not have an alarm. But she's my alarm now.
Yeah, I mean it's worth to try. Like, or if you have kids, wake up when they wake up. I mean, it's a natural way to start your day. When it starts to get light, your body knows already that it's time to get up. It's just a matter of, if you pulled an all-nighter, then you're not going to be able to do that, obviously. But if you go to sleep at a reasonable hour, well, when you're tired, that's your body's way to tell you that maybe it's time to go to sleep. If you listen to your body, I don't think you need an alarm even if you sort of have to wake up at 7. You go to sleep before midnight, and then you will wake up at 7.
Absolutely, especially if you open the curtains and the sun is coming in. I think a lot of people don't use I really enjoy going up in the morning and going into the sun as soon as the sun is here. I usually, now in the winters, I actually stand up before the sun comes out, but as soon as it comes out, I just like to be like in the sun, either for a quick run or just like, if I don't have time, at least like 10 minutes, just walking around the block and seeing the sun. That really sets your, how are they called, the internal rhythms of your circadian rhythm. That's really important. And then you can also sleep better.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that too, especially after moving to Madeira, where the sun is much more abundant than in Finland, where I'm from.
Yeah, you moved from up to the down.
Yeah, yeah.
Really cool. We have one question that I ask each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
I think I classify myself as a generalist. I know a lot of things about a lot of things, but I'm not really an expert of anything. But I do have a fiat profession in construction engineering, so I guess you could learn about building buildings from me. That's something that I still do on occasion to mine fiat. So that's what I actually have my formal degree for, sustainable building technology, which I got from University of Nottingham in 2010, I believe. So I know something about that, but like I said, it's not really, it is something that I chose from pure practical sense, because I figured, I mean, there's always going to be buildings, there's always going to be work in construction, which is true, but it's not really something that I'm excited to get up in the morning, like you said, and, get a huge idea and can't wait to get to work. It's more like something that I worked hard on to learn, and it's a useful skill to have, but it's not my passion.
It's probably also like a good paid skill that you still have, and it's a profitable thing to do with the fiat mines.
Yeah, and this is also something that goes to the the preparation and survival phases. Like if you do have that backup, if you do have that fiat profession, you can always fall back on that. Like that should at least alleviate your uneasiness about quitting your job, because guess what? If you're a professional in any field, you'll find another job later. If you decide that, oh, freedom is not for me, I want slavery, you can go back and be a slave, and you can still be, making good money out of that. So you should not be afraid to try freedom.
I love that. You always have the option to go back in slavery. Try out freedom. Maybe it's not for you.
Yeah.
Really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest, as you know, asks the next guest a question without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you, and I'm really interested in the answer for you, because I think you used that a lot. What is the craziest AI use case you have seen so far?
That's really interesting. The craziest AI use case. I mean, there's a lot of crazy things going on in AI for the past couple years. I guess movies will be the next. We're already seeing kind of crazy clips that are really, really lifelike. I mean, that's something also that Sovereign Individual predicted, that you won't be able to tell what is true from the news anymore. I think we're almost there. That's pretty crazy when you think about it and the implications of that. I guess from professionally, from publication, I am kind of stunned and taken aback by how good AI translation is at the moment. I did not expect it to be so crazy good. So that is something that I'm actively working on currently, and working on improving the workflow. That's going to make a huge difference in terms of making vital information available at a very quick pace as well to a lot of people. Most people don't know English in the world. So that is, maybe that's, I'll pick that as my answer.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that. I'm currently working on making my podcast up there for all the people with all languages, and just AI dubbing it in every language. And actually YouTube is working on that feature. So I try to figure out if I can do it or should do it, because I think YouTube is actually working on that feature where you can just choose which language you want to hear, and YouTube is on the back side of it translating it automatically, so you can listen to that podcast in Finnish in your language, or in Spanish, or in Spain, or like whatever language you have, German, and you can listen to it, and it does not matter which language we are speaking, because the AI not only does the translation, but they also do the voice of the speaker. And that's a crazy thing of like having all of a sudden the library opened up, and it does not matter if you're German, English, or whatever. The whole world all of a sudden is your marketplace in the internet. That's a crazy one. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Niko, already for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Thanks, Robin. You can find me on X with Omnifin, double N at the end. Also on Telegram. Those are the places that I spend most of my time. You should follow Consensus Network. It's Consensus with a K, N at the end, Consensus N on X or Twitter, X Twitter. You can also find me on LinkedIn, being there a little bit more active there now. Not a huge fan of it, but it's one way to reach the normie land, which is what I'm currently working on to broaden the markets, profiling more as a freedom peddler rather than Bitcoin peddler. I'm already known for Bitcoin, so I'm more focusing on the freedom side of things. Now, those are the main places to contact me, and I'm almost always on Telegram. So if you need anything I can help you with, just drop me a line.
Really cool. Thank you so much for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.